Hello, Workplace 20 students. Welcome to our new unit on graphical representation. At the beginning here, we're going to take a look at Chapter 2.1 and check out broken line graphs, which I'm pretty confident that you guys will catch on really quick to that. So let's get into it and let's see what we're doing here. All right, so as you can see here, a broken line graph is a graph that displays information. Another word for information is data. All right, using points joined by line segments. So when it says line segments, it just basically means dashed lines. So that's why it's a broken line, right? So a straight line that has been broken. So here's your visual on that. All right. Again, this is a really important part. Hopefully you guys really catch on to this because it works basically for all the graphs we're going to talk about. But doing the little details and labeling things is really important. So it's important that you understand the horizontal axis, and just like we talked about before when we looked at slope, the horizontal axis is going to be basically your x values. It's going to be, right, what's horizontal, so from left to right, all right, and that will contain your independent variable, okay, and then conversely, you've got your vertical axis, and that's a line that goes up the left side, usually your y values. And before, again, when we did rise over run, this would be your rise, all right? And it contains your dependent variables. So our horizontal would contain your independent variables, and your vertical contains your dependent. So again, really important here to be really precise because your graphs tell the story. And if you're missing part of the information here, people won't understand what you're doing. So make sure you include a title, like here it says gym membership to a local gym, and put the times. It also, you must label your axis, both your Y, so this says gym memberships, and this has the number of memberships, and we'll come back to that a little bit. And it also labels your X axis or your horizontal, and here you can have years. Years are independent, years don't change, but the number of memberships does, that's why they're dependent. And your scale is super important as well. You can see here they go up by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. I've seen students make mistakes where they've started like at 30 and then they went, the first block was 30 and then they went by tens after, which really skews your data and it doesn't really tell the story that your graph is supposed to be telling you guys. But that's another thing too. People will use graphs to try to influence you and might change the scale on that so it makes it look more or less even with the same data. And then another important part here is to include a legend. Okay, so legend's really important here. You can see a solid line would be the males. Okay, so you can read off that. And then here you can see that the broken line right here would be the females. All right. All right, so hopefully that makes a lot of sense so far because we're going to dive in and take and examine a question here. So we're looking at a bakery in Whitehorse, and they make 3 types of bread: German rye, Volkenbrot, and Expedition. All right, and there's a little bit more information on there. See here they give you a table of values and give you data. And with this data, you have to take that and create a graph with it. In this case, we're going to try to create a broken line graph. And so we have to understand how to take this data and organize it inside of our graph. So you can see it says lows by months, which is really good. Here, where it says month, 99.9, I haven't seen any, but I guess there's always exceptions. But the first row is always going to be your independent variable or your X. So you can see then that they took this data here and that went down on your horizontal. And it's nicely organized on there. All right. Now here you can see that it took the number of loaves, right, because that's what all 3 of these are showing, and it made that my y-axis or my dependent variable went on the side. And you can see here the scale was each block is worth 30. So even inside of that, you can see the thirds. So a third would be 10, 2/3 would be 20, and a full block would be 30. That's really important to know when you're putting your data in. So when you take a look here, say at our Expedition bread, you can see in January at 78. And another good point that you can see that we talked about too is it has its legend here, and it also gave the title. So everything's organized. So you can see here that the Expedition is in purple, Without that, I wouldn't know really what it is. If you don't have like pencil crayons and stuff, you either have to maybe use different shapes. Like you could have used all the stars are Expedition and all the circles are German and diamonds are the Volkenbrot. That type of thing. So you differentiate the types of bread. But you can see here, the Expedition bread, the first piece of data is 78. So again, we started January. We know Expedition is purple. So again, this here is 60. That's about 70, 80. So that's why the data was put there inside of on January, because the 78 lined up with there. So you can see all the values for the Expedition bread. You just follow the purple line and you can see where it was high selling and low selling. And then as the baker, you can make some really good informed decisions whether you need to make more bread, make less. One thing that's not the best about this graph that you're looking here, that's always good, it says draw a broken line graph. So really these should be kind of like look like hyphens, like kind of dashed lines, not solid lines like in the example here. So that's another really good point. So now that once you set up your graph based on the data that was there, then you can start answering questions. So this one says, like, does it appear any one type of bread sells consistently rather than another? Well, you can see here, if you look at the Expedition bread, right, you can basically see it's always kind of at the top. It dipped here, obviously, but for the most part, for most months, it was so even like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of the 12 months, it was the best-selling bread. All right, so definitely that's why you can say the Expedition bread constantly sells better. All right, but the German rye bread, all right, if you take a look at the German rye bread here, it doesn't take the dip, right? It's pretty consistent. Like you can see the Expedition bread goes up and then it comes down, where the German rye bread, just kind of seems like you can almost bank on how many people are getting there. It didn't really change much between the 90 and the 60 number of lows. It stayed pretty consistently inside of that, whereas the Expedition bread went all the way up to basically 100, 140, but it also dipped down all the way to 60. So you can see the big difference there. All right. So during what part of bread do bread sales generally decrease, right? Well, if you looked at that, except for the Verboten that really spiked up there, you can see that both of these guys kind of went down, basically, when winter started, right? So maybe people didn't have access to the grains, or they were eating different things, or maybe they bought lots of Verboten brot, to do that. So that's why I love graphs so much. There's so much you can take and read from that. What might explain the increase in Expedition bread during July and August? So this is what graphs does. There's so many jobs for this too. The example here is just saying that people are outdoors in the summers and they need bread that will keep unrefrigerated and would be useful. And when you look back in the thing, like even talks about this bread is extremely healthy and keeps well unrefrigerated. So if you're having your picnic and you're outside, and you don't, it's a little bit sunny out and that, you're going to maybe want to get the Expedition bread because it's not going to get a little stinky on you or a little moldy or what have you, okay? So that's a really good graph to take a look at, and hopefully you can see the story. Graph number 2, again, it's already done for us. You can see here it has a title, it has its axis labeled, right? Both the X, which I'm doing right now, and the Y. Okay, or remember that's the Y, that's the X. This is the horizontal. Oops, sorry, my bad. This is the vertical. Caught myself. All right, and this is the horizontal. Okay, so it says in which month were the most people being placed, how many were placed. So we look here on the graph, right, and now it says months throughout. So you can see here, right, it starts with the letter A. So that would be April, okay? And then here, now that's one thing that's, I'm just looking here. This is tough because there's 2 M's here, right? That could be March or that could be May. And there's nothing really there telling us, oh, here, it does. When we look back in there, we can see April of last year. Oh, maybe not. interesting how it goes from, oh, that has to be May. Because, yeah, we're starting at April, we're going to May, and then June, July, August. Okay, so we're good. That almost threw me off for a bit because we're usually used to starting at January. So good thing we took a look at that. And hopefully that makes sense to you. It makes sense to me. All right, so in which month were most people placed? And again, here you can see your highest value there. So that would be March. All right, and you can see that would be 14. That's where they got the 14. So I've looked at my independent variable March, right? I went straight up. There's where the highest point was. Then when I went over, I could see that it was 14. Notice the scale is 2 people per block, right? So it's really well, nicely or easy to read and that type of thing. In which month were the fewest people placed? And again, the lowest here would be the A for April, and that would be at 2. Right, so what can you make any prediction about a trend of the number of people placed in community housing? If so, what would it be? You can see here basically during your summer months, right? You know, it was a little bit decreasing, but then, you know, starting in the fall almost and going into the winter, you know, it increased, and then it went a little bit down over the holidays and into January, and then it increased, you know, up until spring here, right? So again, interesting data. Again, what we can take a look here is we could find the average. You can add up all the values. There are 12 months in the year. So about 7.6 people, you know, were found houses. So right in about here would have been your average of how many people. So you can see some months it was below, some months it was up. So hopefully that helps you understand this, and I appreciate you guys watching. You can go ahead and check out the formulas. If you have your workbook, there's your workbook page numbers on there, and hope this video has helped answer some of your questions.